Victor Hayes never imagined that one day he'd feel like an outsider in the empire he had built from scratch, but that's exactly what he felt standing at the reception of his own hotel. At 48 years old, still sharp and confident, the self-made entrepreneur found himself utterly ignored by the young receptionist behind the desk, despite being the man responsible for the very hotel's existence. No greeting, no recognition, just the indifferent tapping of her fingers on a phone screen while he stood there, invisible to her. This wasn't a routine visit. Victor had come because complaints had been surfacing about missing bookings, poor service, and an overall unfriendly atmosphere that left guests feeling unwelcome. Instead of managing this from the comfort of an office, Victor decided to visit incognito, blending in as just another guest, to see for himself what was going on. What he saw when he arrived confirmed all his worst fears. The young receptionist barely looked up when he approached. His reservation, confirmed just days ago, was nowhere to be found in the system. Technology rarely failed, people did. And as Victor discreetly pulled out his phone to check the hotel's internal logs, his stomach tightened in disbelief. His reservation hadn't just been misplaced, it had been deliberately erased. By the same woman standing in front of him. This was more than bad service. This was something personal. What happens when the founder of a successful chain is treated like a stranger in his own establishment? Victor Hayes had spent years building his empire, but in this instant, none of that mattered. The receptionist acted as if he were nobody, her focus still entirely on her phone, as if he were invisible. In this moment, Victor wasn't the CEO, he was simply a customer. And how she treated him told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't a system malfunction. It wasn't some sort of mistake. It was intentional. He cleared his throat. Nothing. He gently tapped the counter, waiting for any acknowledgement. Still nothing. Finally, with a visible sigh, the receptionist, whose name tag read Sarah, reluctantly looked up from her phone. She made no effort to hide her irritation, delivering a single, dismissive word. Yeah? No, welcome to our hotel. No, how can I assist you? Just a sharp, uninterested syllable, as though he was an inconvenience. Victor kept his voice calm, but there was a steady intensity to it. I have a reservation. Victor Hayes. Sarah glanced at the screen and lazily typed away, not even making eye contact. Don't see it. Victor's jaw clenched. Are you sure? She sighed again, even more exaggerated this time, as if he were asking her to solve an impossible puzzle. Yeah, pretty sure. And with that, she returned to her phone, the conversation seemingly over. But Victor wasn't ready to let it go. He slowly pulled out his phone, scrolling to the reservation confirmation email. Holding it up, he showed her. Here it is. It's booked. Sarah barely glanced at it before shrugging, clearly uninterested. Well, the system never lies. But it did. Or rather, she did. Victor felt a familiar, simmering anger begin to rise. He had witnessed this before, the unspoken reality where some customers were treated with respect while others were discarded without thought. Today, he wasn't here as a businessman. He was here to test the waters. And Sarah had just failed spectacularly. He took a slow breath. Check again. Sarah rolled her eyes, then tapped at the keyboard again, this time with the lack of enthusiasm one might expect from someone doing a chore they didn't want to do. No. Still nothing. Sorry. She wasn't sorry, not in the least. Victor exhaled deeply and made his move. In one swift motion, he pulled out his secondary phone, the one with access to the hotel's internal systems. His fingers moved quickly, accessing the reservation logs. There it was, his booking, confirmed, entered correctly into the system. But then something else caught his eye, a manual deletion. He glanced down at the name next to it. A slow, knowing smile crept across his face. Oh, this is going to be interesting. Victor tilted his head and spoke with unnerving calm. Tell me something, Sarah. She hummed in response, still engrossed in her phone. What happens when a reservation is deleted? She shrugged without lifting her gaze. It gets removed. No big deal. And who has the authority to do that? She blinked, her fingers briefly pausing as she processed the question. Only the front desk staff. Victor nodded slowly. Like you? Sarah hesitated, narrowing her eyes. Yeah. Victor turned his phone so she could see the screen. Her eyes flickered to it, and for the first time, her body froze. Right there, in bold letters, deleted by Sarah, front desk clerk. Her mouth went dry, her face paling. Ah. Victor leaned in, his voice lowering slightly, the weight of the moment hanging between them. Why did you delete my reservation? Sarah gulped, her voice faltering. I didn't. Victor cut her off sharply. Don't even try to lie. The way she flinched was nearly satisfying, but not quite. For the first time that evening, she was completely speechless. Victor stood tall, his expression unwavering. Here's what's going to happen next. Sarah stiffened, her eyes flickering nervously. You're going to find me a room. Right now. Her fingers suddenly sprang to life on the keyboard, her previous smugness replaced by raw panic. Okay. Found one. She hastily grabbed a key card and pushed it across the counter, not daring to meet his eyes. Here you go, sir. Victor didn't take it. Which room? He asked flatly. She hesitated. 1427, she muttered, barely audible. Victor exhaled sharply. Room 1427. The worst one in the entire building. Sarah thought she was being clever. Room 1427 was located right by the noisy elevator, next to a maintenance closet with an awful view of the dumpsters. Victor raised an eyebrow. Sarah. She stiffened, her face going pale. Do I look stupid to you? Silence. The energy in the lobby shifted. Guests who had been casually chatting now glanced over, sensing something was off. A bellboy in the corner pretended to adjust his hat, suddenly very interested in the ceiling. Victor calmly picked up the key card, his fingers gripping it tightly. Thanks, Sarah, he said, his voice cool. He turned and walked away. But this wasn't over. Not even close. In his suite upstairs, Victor didn't bother unpacking. He had business to attend to. He opened his laptop and accessed the hotel's internal system. In minutes, he pulled up every guest complaint, every issue with staff, every report of misconduct tied to this location. And Sarah's name was everywhere. Ignoring complaints, refusing service, so-called errors that only seemed to affect certain guests. She hadn't just been incompetent, she had been abusing her position. And management? They had let it happen. Victor clicked on the manager's profile. Lucas Carter, a yes man with a title, the kind who avoided confrontation and let problems fester. It was clear. Sarah had been a problem for a long time, but no one had dared to confront her. Well, tonight that was going to change. Victor closed his laptop and headed straight for the manager's office. Lucas Carter looked up, startled, when he saw him. Mr. Hayes, what a surprise. Victor slammed the door shut behind him. Cut the act, Lucas. We need to talk. Minutes later, the entire lobby watched in disbelief as Sarah was fired, right then and there. She screamed, she begged, and she cried. None of it mattered. She was gone. As she stormed out of the hotel, she shot one last hateful look over her shoulder. Victor simply smiled, because she still had no idea who he really was. But she would. They all would. Tonight, he wasn't just rebuilding his empire. He was reinforcing it. And this time, no one would forget his name. Victor stood by the large window of his suite, staring down at the hotel's entrance. Sarah was gone, and Lucas would be next. But this wasn't just about two people. It was about the culture he had allowed to take root in his empire. For years, he had relied on reports, numbers, and glossy updates from the corporate team. Now he saw the truth. A brand isn't just built on flashy buildings or luxurious amenities. It's built on the people who uphold it. Tonight, that all changed. Victor had entered as an observer, but now he was leaving as a true leader. Hands-off management had never been enough. He couldn't just create luxury hotels. He had to protect the standard that made them worth staying in. And that meant removing anyone who thought they could stand in the way of his success. His phone buzzed with messages. Board members. Questions. Panic. Victor smiled as he ignored them. Let them worry. The real work started now. He turned back to his laptop, fingers moving swiftly as he drafted the next steps. Every complaint reviewed. Every employee reassessed. No more second chances for anyone who disrespected his guests. Because, in the end, excellence isn't something you simply build. It's something you enforce.